President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. He goes on to write that the president's actions, quote, present serious risks to national security. The special counsel wrote that the president could also portray himself at trial as an elderly man with a poor memory who would be sympathetic to a jury.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering.
America.
Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. There certainly was a lot of spin control coming from Team Biden over the weekend in light of the special counsel report from Robert Hur stating that although President Biden willfully possessed unsecured classified documents, they're not going to prosecute him for it because he's got a feeble mind and a feeble body, like we've been saying for a long time on this show. But among the spin control that has been happening from Friday to now, there's been some reasonable points. There's been attorneys weighing in on things on both sides. But maybe the most unhinged, the biggest hot mess of it all, was Joe Scarborough on MS-DNC. We're going to break down his initial reaction to the Hur report and the statements about President Biden's feeble mind and feeble body. But before we do that, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you see and hear in this or any other video on our channel, smash that thumbs up button, like, comment, share the show with your friends, all that good stuff, because all of that feeds the YouTube algorithm.
Yes, it must feed.
Thank you guys so much for all that you've been doing to get the word out about the show. You're doing a great job. We've had a lot of new subscribers. And for all you newbies out there who maybe haven't subscribed yet, I hope that this is the video that earns your subscription in discussing the hot mess that is Joe Scarborough. Joe Scarborough is the definition of the hot mess that I talk about in my book, Schnooks, Crooks, Liars, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons, available right now on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and other online bookstores. Just to read from the book really quickly about the definition of what I consider to be a hot mess buffoon, the dominant characteristic of the hot mess is a proclivity to fall into fits of emotional turmoil in moments of great political stress. Let's keep this definition in mind as we watch the reaction by Joe Scarborough to the news of the special counsel's findings.
Robert Hur wrote in his report released yesterday, quote, our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. He goes on to write that the president's actions, quote, present serious risks to national security. But then later in the report, Hur conceded that the evidence, quote, does not establish Mr. Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The special counsel wrote that the president could also portray himself at trial as an elderly man with a poor memory who would be sympathetic to a jury. Hur's description...
A neurologist and a lawyer.
Let me just finish, but I agree.
Well, no, but no.
Joe Scarborough can't even let his own wife finish the report, the factual reporting from MS-DNC on this. He's got to jump in right now. Again, proclivity to break out emotionally in times of political stress. He's certainly doing that on the outset right here.
But we kind of need to stop there. A neurologist.
You're talking about Hur.
Hur from Trump University.
No.
And I'm got.
That he's stammering like an idiot, and he's already invoked Donald Trump because Robert Hur happens to be Republican, and that's well known. But let's be clear. This is a Republican attorney that was appointed by the Biden DOJ to run this special investigation. He was appointed special counsel by Merrick Garland. So any invocation of Trump has to return with a response that Merrick Garland picked this man. Obviously, the fact that he was appointed by Trump as an attorney from the state of Maryland to the DOJ, he was the acting assistant attorney for Maryland. Just because he was appointed by Trump doesn't mean that he doesn't have integrity and doesn't understand legal ethics of what he's doing. And clearly Merrick Garland recognized that when he appointed him special counsel.
Got to stop right here. I know we want to go on and finish this report, but I've just got to start. Ken Dilanian, so bizarre. And there's so many people that immediately heard these random conclusions, irrelevant conclusions, politically charged, Trump-like ramblings.
Would you stop rambling?
There he goes again, invoking Donald Trump. Man, Donald Trump lives rent-free in Morning Joe's head, and probably has for several years if you've watched his reporting, quote-unquote.
Who, first of all, wondered why in the world he would put that in a report, his neurological assessment of Joe Biden, and secondly, why Merrick Garland would release garbage like that in the Justice Department report. Can you give us any insight? Because it sure sounds like James Comey in 2016, who July couldn't indict Hillary Clinton legally, so he decided to hold a press conference and indict her politically.
Now, I'm going to give you a little spoiler. Ken Dilanian actually gives a reasonable response to this rambling, bumbling, stumbling question. Let's break down the hot mess that this question is, first of all. Talking about irrelevant conclusions, I think we're going to dispel that later on in the video when we talk about the meat of the elements of what the special counsel was looking at. But then to compare it to James Comey, who was not a special counsel, who did not have to come out in the summer of 2016 to discuss his personal findings about Hillary Clinton's emails, the comparison is not the same. The special counsel is required to report to the DOJ concerning his findings. Whether or not that gets released publicly is up to the DOJ, and Merrick Garland committed to making this report public before the investigation even concluded. So already you see Morning Joe's question is clouded by his hatred for all things Trump and his guilt by association to then Robert Hur with Trumpland.
Joe, I understand where you're coming from on that. I think a lot of people feel that way, but let me give you the explanation that I have heard from Justice Department officials and some insight into why that was in there, though it did seem gratuitous to a lot of people. If Rob Hur is saying, I have evidence that Joe Biden willfully retained classified information, then in fact, he didn't just find those documents in 2022, as we all thought. He actually found them in 2017, and he's recorded saying that to his ghostwriter. So why isn't he charging him? Well, he has to explain that. So the explanation is Joe Biden said he didn't remember. He was recorded saying, I found classified documents in my house in Virginia to the ghostwriter. He's recorded disclosing classified information to the ghostwriter, according to this report. But he says he forgot that. So Rob Hur has to explain that, in fact, the larger context here is that Mr. Biden has forgotten a lot of things. He forgot the dates that he was vice president, according to this report. He forgot at one point during the interview when his son died. He forgot a key figure in the Afghanistan debate that he cared a lot about, which side of the debate he was on. And so Rob Hur felt like he had no choice, I'm told, but to lay out in detail the faults he found with Joe Biden's memory and explain how that would be perceived in front of a jury, because he's going to have to go up to Congress and justify to a bunch of angry Republicans why Donald Trump is being charged with retaining classified documents, but Joe Biden isn't. So
that's a pretty reasonable explanation. There's going to be nobody happy with this report. Republicans are going to be angry with it because of the perceived unfair treatment between President Biden and former President Trump. The Democrats are going to be upset because they're going to think that this language is unnecessary, as Morning Joe said, irrelevant, probably gratuitous as well. We've heard that word bandied about over the weekend from many different surrogates from the Biden campaign. So nobody's happy with this report, but Ken Dilanian doing a good job trying to explain to Morning Joe in his fit of emotion here why Robert Hur is not given a neurological evaluation, as he seems to argue, but that he's giving a broader context to the decision-making as to whether or not to charge President Biden with a crime here.
the explanation. A lot of people may not like it. Maybe people thought he went too far. And you know, I've obviously heard from people who speak for Mr. Biden who say, you know, look, how did Rob Hur evaluate his memory in a 5-hour interview? I've been with him, you know, for years, and I think his memory is a lot better than that. That's a fair point, I think. You know, Rob Hur is ultimately going to have to go to Congress, and he's going to have to answer for this. But that's the explanation.
Again, I think this is pretty reasonable here. People make judgments based upon a short amount of time all the time, especially juries. Juries are not around people every day to see what their everyday life is. They can only go by what's presented to them in court, in testimony on the stand. So if this is how Joe Biden would have presented after hours in a deposition under questions from the DOJ or from the special counsel, then I think it's reasonable for that special counsel to come to the conclusion that this is how Joe Biden would present under questioning to a jury, to a finder of fact. But Morning Joe here is going to transition off of this point and not really give Ken Delanian the credit for what his explanation is and go on to the political ramifications of Robert Hur's report. And he's going to continue down this hot mess line. Again, remember that definition, acting emotionally under great political stress.
There's no doubt in my mind that that this special prosecutor could have written the same report without using these words: elderly man with a poor memory.
And you know, I'm just going to pull that back just a slight bit here. There it is. Keep it right there. This is the main problem with Joe Scarborough and the Hur report. Joe Scarborough doesn't care about the legalities of it, doesn't care about why these conclusions are irrelevant. He portrays himself to be a lawyer and he likes to use legal words on his show, but he's concerned about the political ramifications, because this sort of headline, elderly man with a poor memory, is what people are going to take away from this report. Indeed, polls by ABC and NBC show that a great majority of voters, over 75%, in the case of ABC, over 85%, are concerned with Joe Biden's mental faculties.
But Democrats worry about the age issue already looming over President Biden's reelection bid. 76% of voters have major or moderate concerns about Biden not having the mental and physical health for a second term. That includes more than half of Democrats.
This was not just one moment in the 12-minute press conference. I mean, take a look at what we saw just recently, a handful of other events. Take a look, a few more.
There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas. I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from Germany, from France, looked at me.
I mean, you know, Mitterrand, whether he's from Germany or France, obviously he's from France, but he's been dead for 25 years. I mean, there are a number of these incidents, and they may be gassed. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but this is what the American public is seeing, and it's raised concerns. Our poll shows over 80% responding, saying that they think that Biden is too old to serve as president.
This is a big deal to voters now. And because this report from the special counsel puts it in black and white, the Democrats must spin away from it. And Joe Scarborough, who is supposedly a reporter, but he's certainly a Biden advocate and most definitely anti-Trump, must spin it that way as well.
The poor memory.
Do you think that this guy is so naive? You think this guy is so stupid? Do you guys think this guy is so clueless that he didn't know by putting words in that Donald Trump would love for him to put in there, that wasn't going to be the headline?
I'm going to go back to my book for one more second here. No plug, but I'm just going to say this. The hot mess has little rational or intellectual discourse to offer and is left with no other avenue than to appeal to emotion during these peak moments of stress. You're seeing it right here with Morning Joe, this buffoon, this hot mess, going after an attorney, claiming that he has a political motivation because he was appointed by Donald Trump, guilt by association to Trump, while forgetting that Merrick Garland is the one who put him in this position to opine on the issues, the legal issues, concerning whether or not President Joe Biden should be charged with a crime. Joe Scarborough is disregarding reality. He's disregarding the facts and circumstances concerning Robert Hur's appointment and the job he was tasked with in order to spin this damaging report against Joe Biden as a way that it's a conspiracy or something between her and Trump, even though Trump has really no power in this whole discussion here.
For the New York Post, that wouldn't be on every... The guy knew. He's a Trumper who knew.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is. One big damn conspiracy! And everyone's in on it!
And that's all he is. He's a Trumper. That's it. He knew. And it's all emotion. It's all BS. It has no foundation in fact. Joe Scarborough is an absolute hot mess of a buffoon. But let's put a finer point on it, because I don't want to leave you hanging with just the ramblings of a buffoon like Joe Scarborough. I want you to understand why Robert Hur put this language in concerning Joe Biden that completely nullifies the ramblings of Joe Scarborough. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. I am not so arrogant to opine on areas of law I don't practice. I don't practice criminal law. I certainly don't practice criminal law on a federal level. I'm more of a practitioner of civil litigation. So I'm going to seek out the opinions of others who can explain this better than I. And that's why I'm turning now to an interview on Fox News with Professor Jonathan Turley.
Professor, did the special prosecutor, Mr. Hur, violate, in your mind, any ethical guidelines?
No, I don't think he's committed any unethical act here. The key to remember is that he took an investigation where the retention and mishandling of classified information was established within the first hour. So he already knew that President Biden had classified material. He knew that they were housed in highly inappropriate spots. The president lied about that even after the report. They were in his garage in these torn up boxes. So the question for her was, well, do we still go ahead and prosecute him? That's a matter of, in his view, intent. And he said we could not establish that full intent because of a lack of memory. But that lack of memory was material to his decision. He was saying, the president would just blanked out whenever we asked him about these dates going back 40 years.
I'm going to try to clear up a little bit of the legalese here. Crimes that are articulated in our penal code and federal law, what have you, they have elements that are required to be proved in order for a finding to be made. Professor Turley here is talking about the element of intent that Robert Hur believes that Joe Biden had to have in order to bring the specific crime concerning these unsecured classified documents. Here, the special counsel said, because Joe Biden does not have a good memory, he couldn't remember factual events concerning these documents, and indeed about his life in general, that they couldn't make the case that he had the intent to keep and possess these documents such that they could meet their burden of proof at trial. I hope that clears it up a little bit. If not, leave a question in the comments and we'll talk about it further.
So he was talking about the key issue, the only issue that remained. Now, I have a serious problem with the report because he describes every element of a crime and then says, well, we just didn't think a jury would take to convicting this elderly guy with a poor memory.
And I somewhat agree with Professor Turley and somewhat disagree. You never know what's going to happen with a jury. It's pretty much a crapshoot, especially when it comes to criminal trials. So while I understand that some people are more risk adverse than others, a special counsel going after a president of the United States would have a little bit of trepidation if there's some doubt in their mind that you can't meet all the elements of a crime if you're going to go after them and bring charges. It's that old adage of, if you go for the king, you best not miss. And if Robert Hur had some sort of hesitation as to whether or not he would miss, that's a good enough reason for a special prosecutor to not go after a president of the United States.
It makes it sound like if he was less sympathetic or his memory was a little better, he might have been charged. But in terms of talking about his memory, that was the key issue that he was investigating. How much did Biden remember? But also, Laura, what's really odd about this press conference is that only one of two things can be true, right? Either he has diminished memory or he was deceptive, right? He went in front of the entire country and said, no, I've got great memory. Well, then that means you were deceptive.
That's certainly one interpretation of President Biden, who responded to the Hur report at a press conference. And I wonder what that's going to do going forward in the election and certainly in the questioning by the House Judiciary Committee concerning this report. If President Biden says, no, my memory's fine, then does that change the special counsel's mind about whether or not to recommend charging President Biden? Very interesting point there. Which brings me back to this buffoon over here. Joe Scarborough had no command of the facts, no command of the law, and was just doing the rhetorical equivalent of flailing his arms around and screaming at the top of his lungs. It was a complete waste of time. He did no service to his audience in putting forth the conspiracy theories about Donald Trump and Robert Hur working together to make Joe Biden look badly politically. It's completely ridiculous. Robert Hur has a job, but more importantly, he has professional ethics that he has to live up to. And if he's examining whether or not a person has intent to do something, that person's memory becomes relevant, unlike what Joe Scarborough claimed in his diatribe that we saw earlier about irrelevant conclusions and whatnot. They were not irrelevant. They were completely relevant to the element of intent. But Joe Scarborough doesn't care about that. He cares about the political fallout of this report. He doesn't care that there was a finding that Joe Biden willfully possessed unsecured classified documents in ripped boxes in his garage. He only cares about what that means to the election in stopping Donald Trump. The constant references to Trump and to Hur as a Trumper by association displays that Joe Scarborough is panicked. He's shook. He's triggered by this report, and well, he should be, because as Biden supporters have been saying over the weekend, the findings should not be about his age, which 80% of the people care about according to polls, but that he's doing such a great job and this, that, and a third. Sorry, folks, you can only do so much spinning in front of the American people before they catch on to the reality of the situation.
You can fool some of the sheep all of the time, but you can't fool some of the sheep all of the time.
But hey, look, that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Do you think that Joe Scarborough is a complete and utter hot mess? What do you think about Jonathan Turley's explanation? Have you watched any of the spin over the weekend on the various news shows? And what do you think about Joe Biden's mental faculties? Let's talk about all of this in the comments. And as always, please like and share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. But let's keep on talking about these issues and more concerning the shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.